Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, I'd like to kindly ask if you could please silence or turn off all cell phones or electronic devices. Thank you.
As a parent has compassion for her children, so may Adonai, our God of compassion, for all of the family and friends of Sheila Zeidman, who we come here to remember today. God knows we are fashion. God remembers that we are dust. Our days are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. The wind passes over us, and we are no more. But we trust that God's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children endures age after age, unchanging. We begin our service by reciting Psalms, thus linking Sheila's life to our ancient tradition, to the Jewish people, and to the eternity of God.
Sheila malot Me'ain ve'ain yavo Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz Ayitin lamot raglecha yanum shomerecha Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomerecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, v'yareach b'layla. Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedcha u'boecha, ve'ata ve'ad olam.
I lift my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? This is a question the psalmist asked thousands of years ago, perhaps at a time of sorrow like this one. And here was his answer. My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, if your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, our guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from harm and guard your soul. For Adonai guards your going out and coming in, now and forever. Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai roi lo echzar. Bina deshe yarbid seni amei minuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi eshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ke'elech b'gei sal mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha mishantecha hemei nachamuni. Taroch lefanai sholcha neged sorai. Dishanta b'Hashem roshi kosi revaya. Hachtov v'chesed yudafuni koyemei chayai. V'shart v'veit Adonai leorech yamim. Those are the Hebrew words of Psalm 23, also known as the Shepherd's Psalm, a psalm that guides us through moments like this one. I invite you, if you would like, to join me as we recite it in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Tomorrow at services in the synagogue, we will announce the beginning of the month of Nisan, which means that Passover and the Seder are just 2 weeks away. The central commandment of that ritual is Vihigadata Lavincha, you shall tell your children, a reference to the recounting of the Exodus story, and the source of the term Haggadah, the text we use to tell that story. In truth, parents tell their children much more than that one story. And what they convey to their children is told not only in words, but in deeds, in the way they live their lives. Haggadah means telling. Today, we will hear some stories about the life of Sheila Zeidman. Seth will begin, and Allison will continue the telling.
So my mother was the daughter of an orphan. Her mother had lost her father, well, first her mother and then her father. And she impressed upon Sheila how important family is and how important children are and how fortunate we should feel to have a mother and to have a mother who's living. Because of that, I think my mother really valued her children and valued family. Some of the most important days were the holidays, bringing us all together for synagogue, making us all presentable, taking us to plays and to the beach, and spending time together. And I think that the things that she learned from her mother, she passed on to us, and we in turn have tried to pass those on to our children. So, thank you.
I guess I was nominated to speak on behalf of the grandchildren. And I was trying to think about, it's so difficult to distill someone's life into just, a few words. But I was thinking about words that come to mind for my grandmother. And it's a lot of F words, but good F words. As Seth mentioned, family. Of course, first, family was hugely important to her. Always important that, you come home for the holidays, you call on a regular basis, that kind of thing. I remember she had this apron that she would wear for most holidays, family dinners, that had little embroidered pictograms for each of the grandchildren. And I think it started with Sam, my older brother, and I when, he was probably a toddler and I was an infant, because I had a baby pictogram as mine, but then all the other grandchildren also got to be children pictograms. And I remember, as I matured to age 11, feeling a little kind of, why am I the only baby? Why? Height-wise, it turns out everyone grew and I didn't. But I remember she said something like, it's just because you're so cute, which was a nice grandmotherly way to handle that, I guess. And I've noticed in the last year or two, she started saying that a lot to me too. She was just like, you're just always so cute. You're so cute. Now I'm 37, so. I like to think of that as her suggesting that, like her, I am aging criminally well. Just, the woman had fantastic skin. Nothing against my mom's side of the family, but I'm really hoping I inherit the Zeidman inability to wrinkle. Honestly, even in the last few days, she was still kind of glowing. She was, very beautiful. The next F word is food. Bubby was often on some kind of diet, which meant that Zadie was also on that diet, unfortunately for Zadie. But she loved to cook. She loved baking, especially, and that certainly was an activity that you could count on doing with her as a grandchild. If you went to Bubby and Zadie's, or if it was at a holiday, you might be tasked with making something. I remember I think it must have been Passover, because there were enough of us that the dining room table was in the TV room with all the leaves out, and one of the grandchildren had helped make dessert, but when dessert was served, it wasn't just the herbs that were bitter that night. Sugar had been substituted for, the legend says baking soda, who knows? And I could not remember which grandchild it was. Sam did. I won't mention it, but I don't know if any other grandchildren actually got to have baking experiences with Bubby after that. Normally, though, baking, of course, requires precision, measurements. But I'll say that Bubby also wasn't afraid to experiment with her cooking. I remember a time that just my immediate family, I think it must have been some Shabbat dinner, and she served some kind of brisket roast, something, and she was excited because Melissa had sent her the meat from Bismarck, North Dakota, and it was like, oh, it's this really good meat. And we finished the meal, and she looked all across the table at Zadie, and with like a glimmer of mischief in her eye, she said, "Should we tell them what it is?" Which is not really something you want to hear after you've consumed any kind of flesh. And then she said, "It's bison," which I feel like now, years on, a bison burger, whatever, very common back then. Everyone was okay with that, but it was also like she was just so tickled that she got one over on us. As far as I know, that's the beginning and the end of Bubby's prank phase. But I will say she was mischievous in other ways, and that brings me to Faith. I'll explain the connection. I was, early 20s. I think it was like my first year out of college. I was at my first real job. And she called me out of the blue one day, and I was on guard because my dad had just been in the hospital, had a pretty serious health scare. So I was thinking like, oh no, is he back in the hospital? Like, my mom has asked her to relay the message. And she said, oh, no, it's nothing like that. But your father has been through so much lately. And I was thinking, if you could give him the one gift that he would want more than anything in the world, would you do it? And I wasn't quite sure where she was going with it. It felt a little bit like a trap, but and in my mind, I was thinking a boat. So I said, yes, I would. And she said, I think he would want you to come home for high holiday services. And I called my dad after and confirmed that the correct answer was a boat, but I figured, it meant a lot to her that I could go home for high holiday services under the guise of it being the greatest gift I could give my father for her. And then finally, fashion. I'm sure I've heard mention of hats, even just as people are coming in. I'm sure I won't be the first or last person to talk about that. But yeah, and not just fashion, but style. She wasn't chasing trends or designers or anything, but she definitely had her own unique sense of style. And I think if I have any flair for that, it has to have been some of her influence. I wear a lot of black typically, even when I'm not at funerals, but I figured I have some color, and sometimes I feel compelled to wear it, and today felt like one of those days. And that, I think, I'm not alone in that, in terms of the influence of color. In many senses of the word, I think it's clear that she brought a lot of color to a lot of people's lives. And that and those F words are what I'm going to be focusing on today.
Thank you, Seth and Allison, for those wonderful stories and getting us started on this Haggadah about an individual person, a mom, a grandmom that you all love so much. There is always more to tell. Last night we sat around the table. We began with some history. Sheila was born and raised in Patchogue, Long Island. She grew up with her younger brother, Chad. Sheila, as you've heard, liked to cook and enjoyed making pancakes for Chad. And once she made so many pancakes, she was afraid her mom would find out, and so she forced Chad to eat them all. Now, the term Haggadah is related to another Hebrew term, Agadah, which means legend. And family legend has it that Chad never ate a pancake again. The story is not really about pancakes. It's about conveying a close relationship of an older sister and a younger brother. After high school, Sheila received a scholarship to study nursing at Syracuse University, a whole $300, but that was a lot of money back in those days, so off she went. At school, she quickly learned that nurses went to the library to study because that's where you could meet doctors, or at least med students. And it worked. She met Howie. Back in January, I asked Sheila what attracted her to him, and Haggadah. She said, he was nice, polite, fun to be with, and then she added, and that's the way it was till the end. I didn't have to ask what drew Howie to Sheila. She was always attractive, a good dresser, and an outgoing personality. They were married in 1958, both still in school. Sheila was quick to point out that they were only able to do that because each set of parents agreed to provide them with the living expenses, $50 a month. Howie's internship took them to Chicago, then back to Syracuse for residency. That was a period in which physicians were being drafted, and that took them to Long Beach, California. Then they came back east and settled in Cherry Hill. Agadah, another family legend. When they first met, Sheila said she wanted a dozen children. Howie said, whatever you want. But upon reflection, they realized that if you can each hold the hand of 2 children, then the 5th would be left to run wild, which may explain, by the way, why there are only 4 children listed in the Haggadah. Anyway, Howie and Sheila figured 1 wild child would be sufficient and settled on 5, born over a period of 10 years. Every Haggadah contains commentary, and we'll let the family provide the commentary on which child was the wild one. All of the children agree that Sheila loved being a mom. According to Karen Melissa, she ran a very tight household, at least in the early years. There was a schedule. There were expectations. You had to show up for meals. There were standards of appearance. And Sheila was not reluctant to give direction and advice. You recalled that this went on through college years and even into adulthood. She wrote notes about how you could improve yourselves. They came in her distinctive cursive handwriting, which you appreciated for its flourishes, as well as the advice, which was pretty good. There are so many stories of Sheila's cooking and baking, apple pie and strudel. The time she made lemon meringue pie 6 nights in a row, trying to get the meringue just right and the lemon to gel properly. She baked challah for Shabbat. Brownie, Schnecken, chocolate chip cookies would be sent to summer camp or college wrapped in aluminum foil. Often they would arrive as a box of crumbs, but still you enjoyed them. And clearly you understand that this was her way of showing love for all of you, for children and for grandchildren. That's Haggadah. There were also delightful stories about the time spent at the shore. Howie loved to sail, Sheila not so much. They both loved to sit on the beach, but not going into the water. However, the shore was not only about relaxing, there were still chores to be done, and houses, whether at the shore or in Cherry Hill, had to be maintained, so your folks would get you up early. There was a lawn to mow, walnuts which fell from the tree to be collected. Chores are about learning a work ethic, and that too is telling. Haggadah. Sheila worked as a nurse in addition to running the household. She did education in schools for Planned Parenthood, and later she was one of the first trainers for Samaritan Hospice. For a time she also got into real estate, and Paul, who was still living at home, remembers being pressed into service. Painting, shoveling snow, mulching, raking, work ethic. Sheila was also artistic. She sewed dresses for the girls to wear to services and for bat mitzvahs. She made mosaics and stained glass. She knitted, did needlepoints, made afghans. Melissa says if she dropped a stitch, she would unravel half a sweater to get it right. Neighbor remembers the baby blanket her bubby made for her, kept it even when it was in shreds. A baby blanket is a way that a bubby says love. So does that apron that she wore with the embroidered figures for each of the grandchildren, all 10 of them. That's Haggadah. Children and grandchildren also seem to remember her cars, particularly convertible VW Beetles. Sam recalls the joy of being picked up at camp with those cars, particularly the light blue one with the Grateful Dead sticker that Bruce had put in the window. This memory led to another family legend involving a car, Agadah. Sheila was in Philadelphia and called the police because she was locked out of her car. They came and opened it for her, and then she realized that was not her car. Great story. I never heard the follow-up. There are also stories about Sheila's sense of style and dress. She bought whole outfits, top, skirts or pants, jewelry, and of course, hats. And each of these outfits was meant to be worn complete. She wouldn't mix the pieces of these outfits. And one of you explained that was perhaps the reason she traveled with 3 suitcases. She was always very put together. The hats in particular were her hallmark. She had a hat room with 89 hats. And when she moved to assisted living, she was prepared to take all of them, even if it meant that there would only be room for a bed and no other furniture. In the end, she relented and settled on 30 hats hung on the wall. In all of the telling, one of the things that all of you emphasized was the love that Sheila and Howie showed each other, and therefore showed you. They were quite a team. They made a home and a life that was an example for all of you. They were devoted to family and to each other. They went to Broadway shows and the opera. They traveled together, the Caribbean, France, for which they studied French, and to Israel, once with Rabbi Lewis, and once they took Sam, Allison, and Kara on an Israel trip with me, one of the TBS trips. They were regulars at services. I have a clear image of them walking into shul together, tall and stately, Sheila elegant in one of her hats. They had many friends at TBS, and they enjoyed showing off the newest grandchild to everybody at Kiddush. I brought along with me, again, today, the family file, which goes back to 1967. It's a Haggadah in and of itself. It documents Sheila's activities in sisterhood and on various committees, Howie's terms on the board, all of your Hebrew school records, which I won't review, and it also tells of a close relationship with Rabbi Lewis and Sarah. One letter I found in the file is particularly appropriate for this season. It's dated April 1980. Dear Sheila and Howard, Happy Pesach to you with thanks. Receiving your gift of wine added a dimension to our Pesach Seder. As you can well imagine, it was not the wine, but the thought and the affection with which the wine was surrounded. We used several bottles of your wine and several bottles of the wine that we had purchased. Somehow, your wine, which we used for Kiddush, tasted much better and had a much more Yom Tovic flavor than did the others. I've never heard that term, Yom Tovic, before. For your constant thoughtfulness, for your attendance at services, for your living the good Jewish life, Sarah and I extend our thanks and our blessings. May the holiday of Pesach see us free from all sorrow, from anguish, and from pain. May it usher in a messianic era of peace, the opportunity for every human being to be fulfilled. With best wishes to the entire mishpacha, fondly, Sarah and Albert Lewis. That's Haggadah, folks. In the memories that you all have, in the stories that you will continue to share at holidays and whenever you're together as a family, may you all find comfort and guidance and love for all the days and the years to come. We rise for final prayer.
And I'll just say, in all the years at TBS, I've never worn a bold, colorful blouse to a funeral, but it was very much to honor Sheila today. El male rachamim shochein b'maromim hamsei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina b'malot kedoshim otarim כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת שרה בת בנימין וחווה שלחה לעולמה בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה אנא בעל הרחמים הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה. ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Sheila Zeidman, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful one, we ask her loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. You may be seated.
Just want to note that we'll be going from here to Crescent Cemetery for the burial, and on behalf of everybody at TBS, and I particularly want to mention Minna Recht, who made a point of contacting us and from Florida to say that she wanted to extend her condolences to all of you as well.